Tortzen,
Here.
Mr. Pope,
Here.
Mr. Summers,
Here.
Ms. Rano,
Here.
Mr. Kowalski,
Here.
Mr. Campos,
Here.
Ms. Bushman,
Here.
and Ms. Erler is excused.
Okay,
We
thank
have a
you.
quorum.
Agenda item 3, Pledge of Allegiance. If we can stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, agenda item 4, public comments. I don't see anyone that has signed up for public comment. Did we get any emailed comments, Carlin?
We did not.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to agenda item 5, presentations. We have our Student Senate Representative report with Matt Frank.
Good evening, board members. The month of November has been an eventful month for both SPASH students and faculty. Our athletic programs have had outstanding success among the conference and even state level of competition. We have claimed conference championships in 4 sports, including boys cross country, girls cross country, football, as well as girls swimming. SPASH sent a total of 20 state competitors in 4 different sports and even claimed a state championship in boys cross country. SPASH also held its signing day for athletes following their athletic careers on the collegiate level, with 3 athletes signing, 2 committed to pursue their academic and athletic goals on the Division I level of athletics, as well as another athlete committing to the NGCAA athletic program. Following the success of our fall athletics, all winter sports have had their first practices at this point, kicking off the winter sports season. These sports include boys and girls wrestling, boys and girls basketball, gymnastics, boys swimming, as well as boys and girls hockey. SPASH has also managed to have woven a string of accomplishments into its creative arts programs. Over the past weekend, our theater program held the musical SpongeBob SquarePants live on stage in the SPASH Auditorium. The play was pulled off with a combined effort from student actors as well as musicians to give the musical a true sense of theatricality. With this combined effort from many talented students, the play has had school-wide success, with many of the shows being close to a full house. Tomorrow, the SPASH Auditorium will be filled once again with performances from both SPASH jazz bands conducted by Brad Schmidt. Both of these performances will be a strong demonstration of the talented musicians our school has blossomed. On Friday morning, 2 trumpet players from the SPASH band played taps over the school intercom following a strong address by Principal Mr. Vollendorf commemorating Veterans Day at SPASH. Multiple teachers had told me that the playing of taps and the address made them teary-eyed. With SPASH having veterans among the faculty, we are truly honored as a school to commemorate their service to this country. November has brought a large amount of success to SPASH and the programs that give our school its character. I appreciate your attentiveness throughout this brief summary, and I look forward to our report in December.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you. Remarkable accomplishments, and I appreciate the detailed report.
Well done.
All right, moving on to agenda item 5B, Superintendent's Report with Dr. Corey Hirschberner.
Thank you, Jen. I am not going to repeat the athletic accomplishments because Matt just did a terrific job doing that. So moving on, it is American Education Week. I just want to take a moment to thank our amazing staff for everything that they do each and every day for our students. It's a difficult job, and it's becoming more and more difficult every single day. So thank you to our wonderful staff throughout the entire district. Congratulations to Sarah O'Donnell. She won 2 awards. Last week, she was honored at the Wisconsin School Public Relations Association Fall Conference. She won an Award of Merit in the category of Marketing and Advertising with the project on Work with a Purpose recruitment campaign. That was for our transportation department. And then she won an Award of Merit in the Special Purpose Publication Project category, and that was for the Setting the Stage for Success, the Superintendent Entry Plan. So congratulations to Sarah on that accomplishment. Well deserved. I want to say thank you to Cooper Oil. Sarah and I had an opportunity to stop by the Cooper Oil office. I think it was last week. They handed us over a check for $19,553. Since 2018, they have donated over $69,000 to the district. So thank you to Cooper Oil for all that they do for our students. Very much appreciated. We did have 4 SPASH choir students that were accepted to the All-State Vocal Jazz Ensemble. I think that was worth mentioning, so congratulations to those students. They are, I will say their names, Patrick Nelson, Paige Patton, Jackson Barber, and Landon Moss. In addition, just a reminder to the board, we will not have committee meetings in December. We're going to have a special meeting that will be about the referendum, and then ask the board to take a vote on December 11th. So just a reminder that no committee meetings in December. Holiday Parade is December 1st. Watch for more information. We are going to have schools and some district representations, so look for that to be forthcoming. Reminder, board candidacy updates. If we have incumbents that are up for election this year, the deadline to submit non-candidacy papers are December 22nd. And then for anyone that might be interested in getting their name on the ballot, the deadline to file paperwork is January 2nd at 5 o'clock. Reminder, the Polar Pond Plunge is December 9th from 10 o'clock to 12 o'clock. So if there's anyone interested in jumping at the Polar Pond Plunge, reach out to Carla Lockman at the Boston School Forest or get on the website. There's information there. Next, and the last update that I have is legislative updates. I just want to remind the board that Dr. Tom Owens has been really doing a nice job following up with our legislators on trying to get the bills passed to repeal the referendum penalties. So thank you to Dr. Owens for that. He continually sends them updates, makes phone calls, and is trying to get that pushed through in the event that we do go to referendum in April, that's taken care of before then. Next, I want to turn it over to G. He has just a couple other legislative updates, and then we'll move on.
Okay, there are 2 bills right now in the legislature. The first one was proposed by Senator Van Wangard and Representative Robert Whitkey. And this bill is called Parents' Bill of Rights, is kind of the name for it. Similar to what is in effect right now in Florida. The bill would establish a number of rights for parents, including the right to review instructional materials and outlines used by schools to receive notice when a controversial subject is going to be discussed in school. It would also give parents the final say on certain aspects of school life, including which names and pronouns are used when addressing a child at school. The second one is one proposed by some Democratic representatives. It would, one part of it would propose to phase out private school choice programs and require increased transparency and accountability from the statewide voucher programs. And the second part of that would propose to raise the special education reimbursement from 33 1/3 to 90%. Those 2 are currently in the legislature. It's interesting, both have been proposed before and not made it. So,
Thank you for the update, G.
Thanks, G.
Okay, moving on to agenda item 5C, the communication report with Sarah O'Donnell.
Hello, thank you. And I should say I did not work on those projects alone. I work with really amazing people, so just really grateful to have that support. The October 2023 communications report is up there on the screen for your review. If we can go to the next slide. Our October focus, continuing to work on those school websites. I think those are going to be just a year, all year thing. It's going to be beautiful when it's done, and I'm really excited. Continue to deliver comprehensive communication and project management to just across really the board, superintendent, school board, and business office specifically as we work towards gathering that information for you relative to the potential operational referendum coming up here in the spring. Continue to do stakeholder research. You'll hear about some of that tonight, specifically from a true expert in the field. I'm really excited to have him share the information that he was able to gather, bless you, over the previous month. And then we just really are focused on continuing to publish, find, and share that engaging content, highlighting stories across all of our schools, our student achievements. We've had a lot of successes to share so far this year, so I'm really enjoying sharing that out with our community. If we take a closer look at the specifics, website performance, is about where we would expect it to be. We saw a little bit of a drop in month over month, which I would expect just given kind of the excitement around the start of school into kind of everybody settling into October. I am really struggling with my papers here. I apologize. Continue to see most visited pages after the landing page being that staff resource page and the SPASH homepage. Social media performance continues to be really high, really engaging. We saw 130% growth in impressions, although we did see a slight decrease in engagements over the previous month. Again, not super surprising, just a typical drop between September to October. Instagram saw a little bit of growth there with 8.3%. Again, a decrease in engagements over the previous month, which is not a surprise. But both channels saw steady impressions throughout the month, which is really great. We specifically see a bump on Instagram when we share high school stories. We find that we're really able to engage with students on that platform, which is really exciting. Taking a look at our e-newsletter performance, our communications department produced 2 e-newsletters, one internal facing, which is that district source. So really focusing on getting staff the information that they need. We saw an average click-through rate there of 17% for the month, very high compared to industry standards. And then we saw produced one external e-newsletter as well, the Education Connection, which mirrors a lot of that same content, but is really focused on engaging both parents in the community and then folks who sign up for that aren't engaged in schools. We saw a click-through rate there of about 10%. A lot of that click-through information was on Corey's budget update. So we are really glad to see people consuming that information. We know that they're at least aware of that. And then we also shared out just some general, please join our planning listening sessions with Dr. Hirschbruner and our internal survey relative to that referendum communication planning work to try to get some really good feedback from staff, and then feedback, we'll talk about that later. We mirrored some of our questions there. Moving on to media relations, we saw 38 pieces of media, I apologize that is so small, coverage for the month with about, I need different glasses, 26.3 million that estimated consumption rate. So again, thank you to our media partners. They do a really great job of coverage. We're really lucky to have the relationships that we have and to see that level of coverage just in a month for schools. Looking at just where my time was spent, a lot, obviously we want most of that to be that strategic communication goal. So almost 40% of time was dedicated really specifically to what communication would like to be working on. Other investments in my time, referendum, obviously that's going to be huge this year. School board needs as well, then secondary schools and some help with human resources. Most of my time, again, community relations work, a lot of copywriting, media relations, and then working on that employee engagement piece through referendum. And then November will continue to be a lot of that same, so continuing to look at developing and moving content onto those new school websites, providing communication and project management support to those who need it throughout the district, really continuing to look for those great content pieces and sharing out our story with as many people as we can, and then just keeping our communications work going. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Sarah.
Any questions?
Thank you.
Sarah, I think you're moving into.
I believe it's Mr. Leatherman first.
Yep.
Okay.
And I would be happy to introduce him. So Peter Leatherman is a partner in the Morris Leatherman Company. They are a survey and polling company out of Minneapolis. We have engaged their services previously for referendum survey work. So this may be a repeat for those of you who were with us back when we did this work before the last referendum, about probably 6 years ago when we did the polling. And I'm really excited to have Mr. Leatherman back with us tonight to present results of the most recent poll relative to a potential operational referendum in the spring. The information shared is really meant for you to be able to kind of digest and get a sense of where the community overall is at, so that as you're making decisions come coming up here in December, hopefully, you really have the answers that you need to know kind of where our community is feeling relative to this decision. Thank you.
Okay. Hello, Peter.
Hello, everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
Everybody see the screen?
Yep.
All right, it's lovely to present back in my home state. I wish I could be there in person, but I have to go to, I'm in between 3 presentations this evening. So just to review with everybody what we undertook with the district. We spoke with 625 randomly selected residents across the district. Interviews were conducted between October 12th and the 26th. Average interview time was 8 minutes. Non-response rate 6.5%. The 625 samples projectable to plus or minus 4% in 95 out of 100 cases. The margin of error is determined by the sample size and not the percent of the population being sampled. Put up some demographics so you can see the profile. The demographics are for 2 purposes. We can validate against updated census information, but we can look at differences between households with children, households with seniors, those sorts of things. First set of demographics everybody wants to know, 48% they're cell phone only, 9%, yes, they still exist, they're landline only households, and 43% have both landline and cell phones. If we look at the first set of demographics, how long did the person lived in the Stevens Point Area School District? We have 27% that have been in the district for 10 years or less.
Peter?
44%
Peter?
that have been in the district. Yeah.
Can we stop for just a second?
Yep.
If you're pausing a little bit, if you shut off your video and just go through the present, I think that will fix that problem.
All right, let me, because I've got, okay, so I'm going to hide this. I don't want to screw this up, and so see this is what I wish I'd just driven over there.
That's okay.
Just fine.
Just your video.
So,
The WebEx video.
Just
There you go.
there you go.
There.
Yep.
video.
Perfect.
All right, so hopefully now I need to get back to my screen. Is it back up?
It
Yes.
sure is.
All right, let's
Not the
try it.
select
And
there.
then interrupt me if this starts breaking up again.
Okay.
Okay, so we've got 27% that have been in the district for 10 years or less and 44% over 20 years. The median resident has lived in the district just over 18 years. 17% have preschoolers in their household. 30% contain a child attending the Stevens Point School District, and 67% are empty nesters. And by empty nester, that does not imply an age. It's just lack of presence of a child. So we could have a 32-year-old without a child. They're the empty nester for the purpose of the survey. So as we just keep this in mind as we go through, these are the opinions of the whole community. So about 2/3 have no children and no connection to the school district. 15% are renters. The self-assessed home value is about $185,000. The resident typically says 2% more Democrats than Republicans. Some college experience is the median education. You have 44% that are college graduates. That includes masters and doctorates and other postgraduate degrees. Well, you have 22% that are high school graduates or less. Women outnumbered men by 2% in the sample, and then 18 to 34-year-olds were 22%, 35% are 55 and over. The median age comes in right at about 47 and a half years is the typical resident, and then you can see the geographic distribution, 49% in the city of Stevens Point, 28% in the rest of the district, and 23% in Clover. Any questions on methodology or demographics before I go into the survey data?
No.
All right, hearing none, survey says. We're going to look at some general atmospherics. And for those that were around with the bond referendum, we helped pass 5, 6, well before the pandemic. The purpose of these atmospherics are to check in. On election day, you want folks to walk into the election booth with no baggage. They're not in there voting a symbolic no for reasons of past spending or personality or anything like that. They're just in there doing a cost benefit, how much is being asked for, what does it cost, and is the benefit worthwhile? So that's the purpose for these questions. Overall evaluation of the quality of education. 82% rated favorably, 15% said only fair, and 3% are unsure. Nobody said poor. What we're seeing, and this is a pandemic, this is post-pandemic, folks have shifted from excellent to good. We're less enthusiastic about everything. And so the excellent rating, which before the pandemic in the upper Midwest was about 22%, it's down to about 10% now. So comparatively, you're up about 7 points off the norm, but the preponderance of folks are saying good. You be having that 82% favorable. That's typically you're in the 80 to 90% range on this. You don't have this growing section of people going to the only fair category. They've just gone to the softer positive at this point. Couple open-endeds. What do they like most about the district? Well, if we add 17% that say the variety of programs and 7% further on down the list that say broad curriculum, you've got about 1 in 4 people that are talking that what they like most is what's being offered in the classes. Good teachers at 16%. If we combine the good academics, the excellent academics, and high achievement stats, you have about 20% in that, the quality of the academics being taught. So your folks on the hierarchy, it differs from district to district, but they would prioritize programming, then academic quality, then the personnel side. But you also do have a couple larger categories. Sports, must be a good sports year for you folks at 11%, and then community involvement. And that's a unique Wisconsin with 1 in 10 following that community pride aspect to the school district. Now, if we ask what they like most, we always follow up with what's the most serious issue. 23% indicate the lack of funding. 18%, and this is the second issue of 2023 that's impacted public opinion research and education across the upper Midwest, is the shortage of teachers. This has gone up, last year, this was 2 or 3%. Now I'm seeing this in 15 to 20% range. So people are very aware of the shortages that are there and expected to be coming amongst teachers. The one that you're low in comparison to what we're seeing across Minnesota and Wisconsin is the high taxes at 9%. This has been typically 15 to 20% in 2023. I think a lot of areas had some significant property taxes last year. We're going to look at taxes more specifically in a little bit. So just those are the top 3. Coming on down the list, then, large class sizes, lack of discipline, too political, declining quality, poor spending, safety, and security. I'll go to the bottom, the nothings. Those are boosters. They see nothing wrong with the district. That 11%, the norm on this right now is about 5%. We typically, before the pandemic, the norm was about 10%, but the pandemic has made everybody have more issues and just be less enthusiastic. So it's a good place to be with 1 in 10, where we classify them as boosters. How are we doing? Is it breaking up at all, or have we fixed that problem?
Not at all. We're good.
Perfect. How does the district do on meeting student learning needs? 51% say all student learning needs are being met, 38% most, 8% said some, nobody said very few, and 3% were unsure. This is relatively strong. In 2023, the norm on those saying all, which is a stringent category, is 40%. It's gone down. Pre-pandemic, the norm was 55%. So it's a very significant increase. You're one of the few districts in 2023 that actually has a majority, 51% saying all. Now, we do follow up with those that said most and some, that's that 46%, and ask, is there a type of student whose learning needs are not being met? That's what's arrayed in the upper left-hand corner, and that's 26% of 46%. So roughly about 12% are concerned about average students, struggling students, and special education students. Those three areas take up 2/3 of those that are indicating that all student learning needs are not being met. But the key takeaway is you're one of a few districts in 2023 that have folks saying all. How do they think about the quality compared to 5 years ago? Well, this one is a pandemic question in a sense. Yes, the pandemic was longer than 5 years ago, but it feels like it's been 10 years and it's been going on forever. And so at this point in time, we hope that you have more people saying better than worse, and you do. Almost 5-1, 43-9, indicating things are moving in the right direction. And so the norm on this right now is 2-1, so relatively strong that there's momentum going in that direction. Some specific perceptions. Does the school district spend taxpayers' money effectively and efficiently? 80% agree with that statement. Norm on that right now in 2023 is 59%. Have you spent past referendum funds responsibly? 81% agree with that. Norm on that is 63. Do you ask for a property tax increase only as a last resort? 77% agree with that statement. That one I really can't give you a norm because it depends on the last time a district asked for a tax increase. You have recency bias there in the question, so it's not fair to do an apples to apples comparison. An area that you're very strong in comparison post-pandemic as school districts is involving the community. It obviously became very difficult to involve the community over the past 3 years, whether it's Zoom or whatever. And so what was normally a 75, 76% norm dropped all the way down to 65%. It's come back up. It's in the low 70s right now, but that 82% is very strong in the community, at least feeling it can have a say. The next two, I guarantee you, there's blips all over the place, but this is where you've landed coming out of the pandemic. Are they satisfied? Make 9-15. That's outstanding. There were points over the course of the pandemic where districts were upside down. They had more people disagreeing than agreeing that they were satisfied. Right now, we've come out at a 3-1 ratio is the norm in 2023. You're better than 5-1. Do they trust you to do what's right for the children? Absolutely, 86-12. And then the last question is this is dipping the toes in the water of funding requests. And the question is, the schools are a good investment, and I would support a property tax increase to protect that investment. The key on this question is always the disagreement. How many people that's your core opposition. And so this question, we're not telling them if it's a bond referendum or an operating levy, if it's $100 a month or $100 a year. How many people just philosophically will not support? 20% is very low in comparison to what we're seeing. The 47 referendum questions we had on the ballot last Tuesday, the norm core opposition at the outset was 28%. So you're about a third of the core opposition to start with. It doesn't mean that they'll support a property tax increase. It means they're willing to have a discussion about it. Overall evaluation then of financial management, outstanding. 70% favorable, 20% unfavorable. Norm on this right now is about 55%. So the district has a strong reservoir of goodwill when it comes to financial credibility. They trust you on financial matters when we look at this question and all the previous questions we looked at in the slide a few slides ago. I mentioned the property taxes. It was not as high as we've seen in 2023. This question, we asked folks, the dark green is their perception of total taxes. The light green is their perception of school taxes. So on this one, excuse me, we have 47% indicating that their total property taxes are high, 33% indicating their school taxes are high. First off, the threshold we use for a hostile property tax environment is 50% and the very high and somewhat high. You're not even close to that. Well, you're close, but that 47% is miles away. You're one of 4 districts now in 2023 that's actually under 50%. The norm in 2023 is 59% in the high category, and the highest, the largest percent of people saying high is community that had 77%. So you're a tax-sensitive climate. That doesn't mean they're going to be thrilled. They're willing to have a discussion. The good news for you is that they don't blame you if they have property, if they're upset about their property taxes. You can see that in the only 33% saying very high and somewhat high. You know, back in the good old days, I've been doing this 30 years, we used to ask, who do you blame? The city, county, or school district? We don't ask that anymore because cities and counties got upset. We just asked it this way so we can ascertain that their animus towards property taxes as a whole is not directed at the district. That's the good news. Bad news is you're pretty much the only show that has to go in front of the voters in order to get approval for a property tax increase. Do they believe the district is adequately funded? No, they don't. A majority, 54%, say no, 34% say yes, and 12% are unsure. This one is all over the board. You will have some districts that just inverse this, some split 45, 45, 10. Your district, though, are only a third believe that you're adequately funded at this point in time. So we ask, if they hear the district's going to ask for a property tax increase, are you for all, against all, or are you persuadable? You start out with a 1% advantage. 25% say for all, 24% say against all, while 49% say persuadable. You're pretty much where we've been over the last 10 years, where we have half the people that have made up their mind with no information. Because we haven't told them what the money would be used for, we haven't told them the increase. But you have 49% that are for it or against it regardless. The key is obviously going to be that 49% persuadable and how they break. What's the tax tolerance for an increase for operations? First off, 29% now say nothing. We always want that number to be under 35% in concept. So that check, that's fine. You also are atypical. Normally it's a ski slope from nothing out down to the higher amounts, but you kind of have a mountain range where it peaks at $8. The typical resident, if we take out the nothing, they're not going to support anything. So a resident who's willing to see a property tax increase comes in roughly at about $9.50, just rounded to $10 a month on the typical house. Now, is that number set in stone? It is not set in stone. That number can have elasticity. It can also have retraction. It depends on what's being asked for, which is why we went through the next slide and asked, I believe, 9 items and asked, would you support a property tax increase for this purpose? You have overwhelming support for all the purposes. The lowest amount is 25% support for the maintaining district facilities. So if we look though at the top, it's 86% support retaining and attracting staff. That links directly back to that concern up front. It was almost 20% indicating. Maintaining class sizes, 85, behavioral mental health support, and maintaining technology, 78% apiece. Gifted and talented, safety and security, child care centers, early learning, and district facilities. You have overwhelming support for all of these. So we pull it back together and we told folks, suppose the district proposed a $14 million operating levy that incrementally increased to meet funding needs during the next 2 years. And if additional funds were approved in the levy referendum next spring, they would be used to fund some of the improvements mentioned in the previous questions. If successful, the district would initially levy for $7.5 million, a property tax increase of $2.50 a month or $28 per year on a $100,000 home. In the next year, the district would then levy for another $6.5 million, an additional property tax increase of about $8 a month or $97 a year for a $100,000 home. So it's about $10 a month. And so when they hear what the money is going to be used for, We have 67% support to 29% opposition. Very strong at the outset. The one thing to note, though, is there's not a lot of intensity yet. Only 13% feel strongly support, only 6% strongly oppose. We asked folks for their reason on the position for the operating levy. The blue bars are their reasons for support. The red are their reasons for opposition. Education's important at 28%. 19% cost is reasonable. 16% they have children. 8% say it's needed. On the opposition side, no children, poor spending, then the cost comes into play, whether folks say their taxes are already too high or the cost of this plan is too high, and then only 1% said needed. If you look at the need quotient here, it's 8-1. What drives people, especially if you're looking at a spring referendum, is need. Nobody wakes up on election day and says, I have to go vote because the cost is reasonable. They get up and vote because it's important and there's something consequential at stake if it fails. And so any discussion moving forward needs to have in that piece of the need and the logical consequences, what happens if it fails. We read 3 arguments in support, 3 arguments in opposition. The most effective argument is for years state funding has not kept pace with inflation, creating a $5 million gap in the district's annual budget. 69% indicate it makes them at least somewhat more likely, but 43% says it makes them much more likely to support. The second argument, required special education programs cost the district $11.1 million than it receives each year from the state and federal government, putting additional pressure on the district's operating budget. 39% impact with a 71% reach. And with additional revenue, the district will have more stable funding and be able to maintain class sizes and continue to offer students a wide range of class options. All of these are winning arguments. You can just see there's this argument, people understand inflation more than ever. And so that is the most important. And then the cross-subsidy issue with special education. And that is a very effective argument across all political groups. Now, reading 3 positive, we then read 4 negative, to be fair. First off, you can see that the impact of the negative arguments is about half of the impact of the positive. What leads, and this, with all the referendums and levies and everything over in Minnesota last Tuesday, the inflation, cost of living increasing, many cannot afford a property tax increase. That's the major issue of 2023. What it's going to be in 2024, it's going to depend on the economic environment we're in. We have to see, but it is impacted greatly in 23. And it is it's the most powerful negative argument, although it's only 21% that say much more likely. The argument that the state and federal government has provided adequate funding and that local property taxes are going up too quickly, only 17%, and then the state legislature increased education funding this year, so local taxpayers do not need at 14%. Overall, when I look at those that supported, and if there was any switch, did they oppose? When we go to the next slide, all of the opposition arguments worked in what I call the echo chamber. They just reinforced the opinion. I really didn't move anybody from support to opposition. So we end up with 68% support to 28% opposed. Still not of a lot of intensity. That's the communication effort that needs to go forward to explain, and that will drive up the intensity from soft support to strong support. And then finally, where are folks getting their information? The district website, 33%, local newspaper, 23%, word of mouth, 16%, and then we go into single digits. Email, teachers and staff, social media, e-newsletter, and cable. How do folks prefer to receive their information? District website at 35%, local newspaper at 20%. You are, if we look at this, you're atypical, the most effective way. You actually have more people preferring to push a button. some sort of electronic means of communication, as opposed to most districts are a plurality, if not majority, of folks saying, I want something in print. And so that you are unique in that regard. So that is my last slide. Let me back out and so I can see the discussion. And I think I would open it up to questions.
Is that going to be shared?
Questions?
It's a lot to digest.
Yeah, I think
and
they're
appreciate
processing,
it.
yes.
Everybody's
Right.
just kind of like,
Oh, when I do this, I tell boards I often feel like I'm making you drink through a fire hose. It's a lot of information to process.
true, yep.
Is
But it's
this a-
appreciated.
Oh, is this available to
Yes.
us? We can go and see this.
We'll send it to you.
Oh, you will?
We'll send it to you, and then we will link it into the board docs agenda as well. Yep.
What other questions do you have?
I'm with Judy, that's a lot to think about.
Yeah, it is a lot to digest and process.
Very good information. I mean,
Thank you.
it's a lot, but it's good. Miguel?
I do have a question, Peter. Who are we being compared to? I don't know what other districts you work with, but who are we being compared to with some of the other numbers you were talking about by comparison to? Who are we being compared to?
Typically, with the comparison I'm using with you folks, it's outside of large metropolitan areas in the upper Midwest, those school districts. So it's anywhere, in your neck of the woods, we're going Austin, Broadhead, it's into Minnesota, we work in Indiana, Nebraska, Iowa. So I'm not going to compare you to, Hennepin County and Minneapolis or around
Right.
the suburbs of Milwaukee or
Midwest.
Franklin or anything like that. That's not a fair comparison with your makeup.
Okay, thank you.
You're breaking up just a bit again, Peter. I think if you stop sharing.
I'll turn my video off.
Okay.
Here we go.
Peter,
Perfect.
do you know top of mind,
Better
like
now.
how the districts that had referendums last week performed? In the upper Midwest?
Well, in Minnesota specifically, I haven't got a chance to get everywhere, but I did Minnesota this morning before I had to do other stuff. In Minnesota, 38% of operating levies passed. It was 50% success rate for bond referendums. For our clients, we had 75% pass. But especially when you got outside large metropolitan areas, the financial insecurity of household, the financially stressed, that income versus expenses really is taking a toll. And like I said at the start, the higher that number goes, you actually had, and we did ask the question, I can't remember if we had it in the chart earlier, the key question, so the question is, when you think about your household finances, how would you describe your financial situation? Your monthly expenses are exceeding your income, you're meeting your expenses, but putting aside very little. You're managing comfortably, or you're putting away some money, or you're managing very well. You have 46% that fall into the financially stressed category. What we're finding right now is it's come down. 2023, the first part of this year was about 55 to 60%. I mean, we were approaching 2008, 2009 recession. It was right now highest level of financially stressed that we have over the course of the pandemic. It never got to this point in 20 or 21. So you're 46%, you're on the lower side. But that number, the higher that number is, like I said, the more folks that would support but can't afford to. That's the macro takeaway. Most districts passed or failed had nothing to do with how much work they did or what the question was. It was simply, could the community afford anything? And differentiating between have to haves and nice to haves. Districts that had, like on a bond referendum, that had any sort of athletic component to it got destroyed. It's just no appetite for those sorts of things right now. And that goes back to the recession of 2008, 2009, where districts could really only pass maintenance and deferred maintenance and those sorts of things.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions? Or, oh, G's got a question?
That, you want to go?
No, go ahead.
That 38% passing rate kind of stuck out in my mind. Is there any idea if those are recurring or non-recurring referendums?
All of those were the new funding requests. All the renewals, shall we say, the districts, you don't really have to go for renewals anymore over here. So those on the ballot in Minnesota, it was new funding requests. So it was 38 to 62.
But regardless of whether it's new or old, you either request a renewable or non-renewable. So were these districts, were they broken down by whether or not they were asking for
Recurring or not?
recurring or non-recurring?
It's recurring.
All of them were recurring?
And they do it over here. We don't do shorter time frames. We do it in 7 or 10 years over here.
Okay.
But Peter, did I hear you say that 75% of the districts that you worked with doing a similar survey passed?
Yes.
Okay.
And why do you think that would be? I'm just curious. Like, what's the differentiator?
Planning, to be quite honest with you.
Using the data to inform how we, okay.
Right. Like, I mean, I was in southern Wisconsin, it felt like for the first month of January, telling districts what they could and could not go for in April. And it kind of went through the entire 2023 where I don't think there was one district that I said, you can go exactly for what you're asking for. You have to make modification.
Okay, that makes
Some
sense.
districts, I had to say, you can't go. There's no way to pass this year. So you're one of the unique ones where I don't see really any need to scale back on it. You have the components line up with the request, the funding, the tax tolerance. But I mean, before I hopped on with you folks, I was on with the district in northern Minnesota who did not do any survey research. And now they want to do what I call an autopsy. The patient's dead and we need to go figure out why. And they kind of said, if you would have done, how did you pick 77 million? Well, the architects and the facilities committee. They did nothing, no sort of engagement with the community to see even if it was tolerable, and it failed 40-60. And so I really do think that the survey lends itself to thoughtful planning.
That makes
One
sense.
thing the survey can't do is who turns out. And turnout, I would say overall was abysmal. All the way down to 8% turnout in one district.
Well, while we have you, just one other question. So we are considering a spring referendum. Given that it's a presidential election year, we're just talking about turnout, like, what do you think about that? Like, is there preference one over the other, spring versus fall?
I would
Be too
say
late.
spring will be easier probably to communicate. It's going to be so cluttered and hard to cut through with communication. I mean, all of 24 is going to be that
Yeah.
way. But I think it would be easier to be intentional and be early. You're helped by greater turnout. The data shows that. I mean, where districts also got in trouble is you have 20% turnout, then it matters who turns out, because every
Right.
district has 20% that are upset and will vote no. And so if you don't get so 2024 is not a get out the vote effort. It is a communication effort.
Okay.
Because on election day, if they walk in the voting booth, a surprise voter is a no voter. So the whole role of getting is to get information to folks. So I mean, I think I would definitely tip towards April versus November, simply because I think November is going to be, I think everybody is going to be crying
Tired.
for it to be over.
right? A takeaway for me, Peter, was, you really talked about the strong support and then the soft support. And that's what stuck out to me. We've got to really do a strategic job of making sure that we get the facts out to those people in that some support category in the hopes that then they would move into that strong support.
Absolutely. People in this time, like I said, the support have to haves, not nice to have. They have to understand there's something at stake. What's going to happen if it doesn't pass? And I mean, quite frankly, if you can't come up with it, and if school boards sometimes get nervous when I say this, we don't want to threaten. It's not a threat.
Right.
It's factual. Something has to happen if the funding doesn't come in, or if it's not, nothing's going to happen. Then one could argue whether it was
Exactly.
needed. I always tell folks, you also have to be generally specific, and by that I mean, one district 20 years ago said it's a large district. They had two major cities. They said, we're going to close a school in one city, and the parents in the other city skipped to the polls voting no because they weren't going to be impacted. What they should have said is, we will consider closing a school. And that's what I mean by being generally specific. But you also have to follow through. And because, I've seen districts, we don't want to make these hard cuts, even though we told them you'll never pass anything for 5 years. It will destroy trust. So people have to understand that there are logical consequences if something fails.
Other questions, discussion? Okay,
Thank you so much,
so
Peter.
much.
This
Thank
was
you,
very
Peter.
helpful.
Thank you.
thank you. Have a good night.
Pleasure. Be well. Have a good night.
Thanks,
Take care.
Peter.
I think Sarah's got feedback on staff survey, operational referendum, agenda item 5E.
Yeah, so what we did, obviously worked with Peter in developing those questions. So one thing we wanted to do while he was deploying that survey to the community was just to test those same questions with our staff. So I included a dashboard of how that came back, really looking at those priority areas for operational referendum again. And what I was looking for in doing that was if we had any big gaps between what our staff was saying and what the community was saying. And we're really not seeing that, which is a good thing. At the time I wrote the memo, we had 228 respondents. That dashboard that is linked in there for you is also live, so it will continue to update. We had a couple stragglers come in late, which I still think it's very important for their voices to be heard. And then there's also a PDF included there for you. So looking at those staff surveys, highlighting just priority areas deemed most critical by staff included competitive staff wages and benefits. Obviously, no surprise there. That's really important. Maintaining facilities such as roofing. Interestingly enough, right, we saw that a little bit lower in those community surveys, but from those who are in those buildings every day, we saw that to be much higher. Providing additional behavior and mental health supports for students, and then maintaining or expanding academic classes and programs. We did not see anything that tested very poorly. We were also paying attention to whether or not folks needed more information, right? We're asking these questions cold. We've done a little bit of communication, but not a lot because, right, we're information gathering. We want you to be able to have that information as you make decisions. So looking at the two places that our staff really felt they needed more information before they would be able to make an informed decision was looking at the potential of having those early learning programs, including school-based childcare to really serve students aged birth to 5, kiddos aged birth to 5, and then expanded gifted and talented enrichment. So those weren't no's, those were just, wanting more information, which I think is really good feedback. We also offered the opportunity to give us some open-ended comments, just, what do we not know that we're not asking? And around those pieces, those themes really focused on teacher compensation and support, efficient use of funds, support for special education, and employee well-being and academic support. So again, no real surprises there, but definitely worth noting those were the things that our staff were concerned about. Any questions about the staff results or thoughts on kind of how we went through that process? Nope.
No questions? Okay.
Okay.
Thanks, Sarah.
Yeah. I'll just stay here.
Yep.
One last thing
yes,
for you
right.
tonight. So talking about, right, this need for communication, kind of what do we do next? How do we get through that? I wanted to provide you a draft of the operational referendum communication plan. It's included in your packet. I'll just pull out a couple highlights from there. At some point, I would really like the board to weigh in or approve this plan so we know that we're all kind of on the same page as we work on this together. So the goal is really to educate our community so that when everyone goes to the polls, when they're voting, even if they're voting no, we at least know that they understand what a no vote means, just like we know that they understand what a yes vote means. So that's really our goal as a school district. We would do that through multiple channels, really working to reach all segments of our population. As we saw, there's a large portion of this community that has no direct tie to the schools, and those are really the folks that we want to make sure we're reaching. So informing, educating, and engaging to provide information about the financial status of the district and the potential impact or implications of not moving forward with a referendum. We would start those communication efforts immediately, should or when the board makes that decision. So we're already doing a lot of that kind of pre-planning, pre-prep work. As you can see in the plan, I have included just what I see as kind of those 5 key pieces that we need to be focused on. We've added some key messaging in there. I included just kind of an outline of, tasks and who's responsible for making sure those are executed, which includes different communication channels, strategies, and tactics. I think being really explicit and really specific in how we execute those will help us. And then just put together a timeline of, what does this look like month by month, so the board is educated on, what we're thinking for planning, key messaging, all kind of that really detailed work. In addition to that, then I think just being really clear on who those target audiences are and what those communication goals are. So I'm happy to take feedback on that if, certainly if you think we missed something or one of those key messages isn't resonating. Even after PAST, I envision this, being a very agile document, an agile plan as we move through. I don't know what we may be talking about in February around other topics that could potentially affect referendum communication and messaging, but really wanted to give everyone an idea of where we would start.
Questions or feedback for Sarah? Okay, I believe we are also looking for a motion to approve the 23-24 operational referendum communications plan as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, motion made by Judy, second by Dennis. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
Thank
you for
you,
all
Sarah.
your work,
Thank you.
Sarah. So detailed.
It's going to help us stay organized.
All right, moving on to agenda item 6, consent agenda. This includes the minutes of the prior school board meeting from October 9th, 2023, the minutes of the public hearing from 23-24 budget on October 23rd, 2023, the minutes of the special school board meeting on October 23rd, 2023, the approval of the scheduled monthly bills, and employment recommendations. Any discussion or questions? Okay, hearing none. Carlin, can you please call roll due to the schedule of monthly bills?
Mr. Pope,
Yes.
Mr. Campos,
Yes.
Ms. Reno,
Yes.
Mr. Kowalski,
Yes.
Ms. Portson,
Yes.
Mr. Robbie,
Yes.
Mr. Summers,
Yeah.
and Ms. Bushman.
Yes.
Okay, we still needed a motion and a second
yeah.
on that, though.
So moved.
Motion made by Dennis, second by Judy.
Thank you.
Okay,
We'll do all the work.
with that, I'm moving on to agenda item 7. I'm going to hand this off to Judy for business services.
All right, we had a great meeting with a lot
Yes, I saw.
of discussion, and we actually have 3 things that we'll be seeing here. The first is the approval of the 24-25 budget calendar guidelines. So this is something that we do every year, go through and approve this. I don't know if we need Tom to do anything.
This is an
so, I
annual.
mean, it's an annual thing that we do, so. So I will make a motion to approve the budget calendar guideline for 2024-25 school year.
Second.
A motion made by Judy, second by Miguel. Discussion or questions? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
All right, the second was approval of per pupil and department allocations for the 24-25 school year. So we actually have two motions for this. And it really is making sure that we have that funding in the budget for those pupils, for the departments and program areas. So I will start with motion to approve the adoption of the building per pupil allocation as proposed at a total of $1,764,465.
Second.
Motion made by Judy, second by Ted. Any questions or discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
The second part of this is motion to approve the adoption of the department program allocation as proposed for a total of $7,470 and or $470,118.
Motion made by Judy,
Second.
second by Ted. Discussion or questions?
I have.
Sure.
The, from one year to the next, I see the numbers exactly the same. Is this assuming no referendum success?
It is.
Okay.
If the referendum passes, we would bring this back to the board and recommend an increase.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, because it's been a while since
Say, how
it's
many
been the
years?
same.
Since 2015.
So it's been 7 years, 8 years since we've had any kind of increases.
Yep.
Good question. Any other questions? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
All right, the last one that we have is actually the one that we spent the most discussion on. And it is around the fees for the student schedule fees. And so one of the things that we really want and had a lot of discussion around is making sure that students and parents are aware of all of the opportunities that are available at all of the schools. When we went through all of the different activities that students can participate in, vast. As well as making sure that they understand what fees are involved in each of those activities and that there is financial assistance potentially available. So we do have some ways to get that information out and share that. So that was one of the things that we talked about, is making sure that we really had that available and everybody knew about that. And there were very few changes really to all of the different activities. So I will make a motion to approve the 24-25 student fee schedule.
Second.
A motion made by Judy, second by Miguel. Discussion or questions?
Just a question. I know last year we brought the same question regarding students and families where this is a hardship. And, you know, we indicated that we should make sure that we're doing our very best to make sure that everybody's aware of this. I guess my question is, do we have a sense that everybody is aware of this? And what did we do from last year to this year to improve upon that, since that was a goal last year as well? Not an official goal, but it was a direction that we wanted to head as a board.
Yep, that's exactly what the discussion centered around at the committee meeting, Dennis. So we have, I would say, enhanced, but we still need to enhance even more. It shouldn't be a one and done. You know, we'll share with families. We need to find ways to continually make sure that students and to make sure that families are aware of, number one, what's offered, and number two, if they can't afford it, there are waivers that they can fill out and get assistance. So Chris and Jeff have already started those discussions within their Ed Services department as well as with principals.
And I would hope that's robust, because I have just a feeling, I think there are children out there and young men and women, students, who aren't participating because it's overwhelming for them, and they could never even imagine about being part of our certain programs, because there's no way their parents could come up with that kind of money, meaning band or you know, field trips that they take and class trips that they take, and a lot of experiences that a lot of families take for granted. We have a lot of families that and children who aren't participating because of money. So I would hope that's a real robust, and again, I could be wrong, but my experience has shown that that's pretty valid.
Right. We want to remove those barriers.
We
And I
talked a
think-
lot about that, and that was probably 90% of what we talked about was, and also an emphasis on making sure that the students clearly understood it, because a lot of times, and I come from this, a lot of times the parents, the moment there's a fee involved at all, there's just a listening. They don't even hear the rest of it because that's not even an option for them. Like hockey, $500 is we're done talking, done listening, and so the kids though, they're the ones that are the conduit to get this information because they're not going to stop listening. They're not worried about the money as much. It's the parents that might be worrying about it. But if the students understand that, hey, this can be waived, then they can go back and be like, hey, mom and dad, I can join hockey now. It doesn't cost us anything. Versus a parent who might just stop listening. And so that was a lot of our conversation, was make sure the students thoroughly understand it as well as the parents.
And I would like to see it as part of our outreach program through our coaches, our advisors, our guidance counselors, our
Teachers,
teachers.
yeah.
Administration is, making sure that that is something that we are placing consistent attention to. Because they only get one high school career.
Yep.
And it's different for families of means and families that are strained.
And
it
if,
should be that way.
yeah, and that student communication piece it's important, right? Because if they know there's an opportunity, the teacher can invite them for that conversation. But if they don't know, then they're just not even going to ask, so. And it sounds like you guys covered it, so we're good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And we even talked about students moving in mid-year.
Yep.
So if we do it at the beginning of the year and then don't think
lost.
about it later, so how can we do things that are more evergreen?
And you have activities throughout the year that are coming up, so if you do it just begin the year, you know how
forget.
lives are for young people. By the time December rolls around, that's forgotten.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'm glad you're on top of it.
Thank you, Dennis. Thanks, Judy.
It's a hard line to deal with. I've asked principals, do you know if any kids are not participating because of the fee? And generally, they say, we try to get to everybody, but of course there are some. They're scared to ask. They're embarrassed to ask. Parents could be embarrassed by having to ask. I've asked school secretaries about it, and the form is right there. They showed me. It's right on. You can grab it. No, and they will ask people. They'll do their part.
I'm happy to hear that.
It's you got to get it out there, but you don't want everybody knowing.
Right.
It's hard to balance that. It breaks your heart,
Yeah.
if you can't get to those kids.
Right, I agree.
I don't know
Good
how
point,
to
G.
solve that problem.
And I think one thing, Jeff and I have revealed pretty early on in this process in terms of recalibrating around sharing that information more intentionally and consistently is the growing number of refugee and newcomer families that we have. And really being intentional about sharing that information with students. We've recognized and identified that is a population of students in our district and a demographic that we can do better in terms of sharing this information. So that will be a concerted effort moving forward through the upcoming year.
Awesome.
And I want to say, like, sports is one thing, because you can get clubs, and we have in the past, when I was coaching, say, don't worry about the fee, we'll figure it out, and things like that. The fees for the classes, like $10 for this, $10 for that. A lot of times as a teacher, you say, we used to sell safety goggles for chemistry. I got some. Don't worry. If you're telling me after a week of telling you that this is a fee and you're just haven't come up with it, here it is. So teachers can do and staff can do their part in one-to-one with the kid, not just a secretary telling parents,
Exactly.
You can get out there.
Yep.
Make it known.
Okay. Good discussion. So all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thanks, Judy. All right, moving on to Educational Services, Agenda Item 9. We have the Educational Services Committee report with G.
Lost my page here.
I know there was a lot on that business services.
Well, we only have one, though. We have secondary course proposal names and additions, and Jeff is going to do that. But before that happens, we did talk a lot about Wisconsin Act 20, the reading program, which is coming. and it's a big deal for our staff. And we're gonna hear more about that. And it's something that has to happen. We have no choice in doing that, and there's gonna be a lot more information in the future, right, Chris?
Right. We were able to share some of the, I guess, preliminary release and information specific to Wisconsin Act 20. Still several unanswered questions, so as G said, more to come. And once we have some additional, I guess, finalized details, we'll be sure to bring those forward to the full board.
Thank you.
And with that, I think we'll proceed with course proposals. Jeff, I'll allow you to go ahead and cover those name changes first, along with the additional courses that are being proposed.
So what we'll start with is just kind of a review of the process that we use when we do course proposals. So anytime a course proposal comes before, that teachers want to bring before the board, it always starts in the building. That's one of the things that I think both Chris and I have worked really hard on, is kind of fine-tuning our processes and make sure that it's equitable across all of our sites. So what we do is our instructional leaders within departments will talk to the teacher who wants to propose a course. That discussion then happens at the building. The building principal is in support of it. Then what will happen is then it comes to me for secondary education, and what will happen is I review it. I'll usually ask several follow-up questions, and then Corey, Chris, and I kind of come together, we review it, go back and forth with the building principal. And that all happens before we come to Ed Services, which we did last week, and now obviously before the board for full approval. So what we have in the packet is we've broken it up into two parts. The first one is SPASH. So if you look at the proposal from SPASH on the cover sheet, what you're going to see is that we have 4 name changes and 1 new course proposal. Name changes are, and I talked to Mr. Vollendorf about it, that can be kind of the bane of this job's existence because they're constant, because we're trying to be responsive to students. So what you're going to see in there, I'll do those first very quickly. In the business and computer science area, you'll see that we have a social media marketing class. The old name for that class was social media and e-marketing, so we're just trying to make it more responsive to what students are talking about. Family and consumer science, in there we have 2 name changes. Advanced Design Studio is just to align better to the sequence of courses. The first one is called Design Studio, so then Advanced. And then the Foundations of Healthcare, I was actually involved in this one. We surveyed the students. We had some students that thought they were going to get health credit for the old course, and that's very different. So we surveyed students and updated the name on that. The last one is a special education class, and that's changing the name to Reading Lab 1 and 2, because if you look at the old name, it was Reading LLI and Reading Rewards, and as director of secondary ed, I could tell you I wasn't 100% sure what all of that meant. So we want to make it really user-friendly for our students and our families. And then at SPASH, we had 1 new course proposal. This one I'm really excited about. This was going to be to offer AP Calc BC. We currently offer AP Calc AB, and that focuses on Calculus 1. If you look at AP class when it's BC, that's going to give you Calc 1 and Calc 2. So we would have the option to offer that experience to all of our students, to give them that rigorous experience. Right now, we currently have we have 82 students signed up for Calc AB, so that offering would be there. One of the questions that did come up when we met as Ed Services was, would this be available as a DE class? I checked with Mr. Vollendorf. Currently, it wouldn't. We need a math teacher with a master's degree in math, which is really, really hard to find because they can go do a lot of other jobs and make a ton of money. But if we ever did have a teacher with that, we could pursue that, and we do have the programming set up for it for the teacher. So that's the high school level. Any questions for the high school courses? All right. Next one is the junior high packet. So here you'll see there are 2 name changes and then 2 new courses. All of these are kind of tied into the approval of the new schedule. The 2 name changes that we have are in the family and consumer science area. That is going to be Family and Consumer Science Life Choices. That's going to be the replacement for what was FACS 8. That's just more reflective of the course content they have. And then Exploring Family and Consumer Sciences is going to replace Successful Teens. So those are just simple name changes for those courses. They're working to create that alignment with the new 7th grade offering that we have. And then we have 2 new courses.
So the first new course I'm going to talk about is within world language, and that one is the foreign language exploration class. And this year, like we typically do with new course offerings, we're going to run that one as a pilot, because one of the things we always do is we look at our FT across the board at secondary, and we want to control that. But that course gives our 7th graders an opportunity to explore both Spanish and French as 7th grade students. Right now, they have to dive in and choose. And a lot of 7th graders, I can speak from experience with one, that can be a really hard choice because they don't know what they like yet. So we wanted that opportunity for them to be able to explore either of those two options and then decide on which pathway they may want to go with a foreign language. I'm also really excited about this because it's a semester class. And as we go through our schedule change, having another semester offering would be really nice for our students. The other one you'll see is the Introduction to Career and Technical Education. So this class would be that year-long course where students would get 9 weeks in each one of our 4 major blocks within CTE. So they'll spend one quarter in each one of those 4 blocks to be able to see what's available to them. We have so many great offerings, and in talking to parents and talking to teachers, it's hard for our kids to get exposure to all of them. So they'll get that at 7th grade. And that course will replace, right now we have a semester offering. That's the business and career skills and computer science, or consumer science only. So this will replace that with a year-long offering. Any questions with the junior high material?
I just love that we're giving them opportunities to broaden exposure and determine where they want to go, right? I mean, I think most likely, even with the world language, whatever you take, you just go forward with, because rarely would you go back, start with Spanish and go to French, so giving them an opportunity to feel it before they dive in, I think is good. Questions or feedback for Jeff?
We did make the point that this is cost neutral.
Yep.
Because even in new courses, we would be taking those kids from other courses.
Yeah.
And so. It's
And like I said, we see that
either way.
that fluctuation every year with students enrolling. We see slides back and forth, and that's something we'll be paying attention to as we go through the process.
It's important. Thanks, G. Okay, we are looking for a motion to approve the proposed 24-25 secondary course updates and revisions as presented.
Make a motion.
Second.
Motion made by Alex, second by G. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thanks, Jeff. All right, moving on to agenda item 12, we have policy and legislation, new policy 7540.08 artificial intelligence. I'd like to invite Corey to present on this.
So we're asking the board to approve adopting this new policy, which pertains to artificial intelligence. It's 7540.08, and basically this is just recommended by Neola. We've heard a lot about AI. This policy is likely going to evolve. It's very general in nature right now, but what this policy will do, it will support the use of AI in our educational programming and operations, as long as those that are using it, follow any district guidelines, follow board policies as well as state and federal laws. So we think that this is a really good thing, and we'll continue to work with Neola and enhance this policy as we learn more about AI.
Questions? I mean, this makes sense. We know that digital and AI is only going to be more prevalent, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, proactive. Okay, we're looking for a motion to adopt policy 7540.08 as presented.
So moved.
Motion made by Judy,
Second.
second by Ted. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Moving on to agenda item 13, general, we have city request for pine tree removal.
Yes, Mayor Weezer reached out. They're looking for the holiday tree for this year. They spotted a tree that's located on 2nd Street. On the property out by Spash, west of Spash, we had a house that was recently burned down. They would really like to use that tree. We support them doing so. Chris Budzinski had a really good idea. He said if the board decides to support this request, we would recommend that we plant 2 new trees in a better location somewhere on district property. I thought that was a really good exchange. So our recommendation would be that we support this request, but we wanted to not make that decision on our own. We thought that it would be good for the board to chime in and help make that decision.
I had to kind of chuckle. As I look at this, it says clearly the middle. If you would look at them, you would know which tree they want right away.
There is a Charlie Brown tree.
I love the Charlie Brown trees, yes.
Can we get 3 new trees?
Yeah.
Possibly.
3, they can chip in 3 trees. Kill 1, give life to 3.
Yeah.
And the city would pay for those 3 trees, correct?
We have not had that conversation back and forth, but yes, that would be our request.
Well, I'm sorry, what did you say?
That the
The
city
city.
would purchase this.
Yeah.
We want our tree.
They're usually pretty generous
Hey,
with.
we're gonna take your tree, and by the way, you can buy yourself 2 more trees. Doesn't sound like much of a deal.
Other
So-
questions or comments?
No, that sounds
Have
good.
we ever done this before?
Not that I'm aware of.
Can it be made a spectacle at all?
Yes.
Yeah, I think so.
Sarah has already asked that. Oh, I should mention.
Like an ornament with each of our faces on the tree?
like the cutting down. Like it would be
Yeah.
great as an event, and we could be there. And
Yes,
Yes.
Sarah is going to be there. They are gonna provide, I think, the stump grinder. We asked that, and then we would help with the cleanup process. So it's gonna be a collaborative effort, and we would
Yeah.
highlight this.
Jen's going to run the stump grinder.
I will totally run it.
cut it down.
There you go.
Okay, so good discussion. We're looking for a motion to approve the City of Stevens Point to harvest the pine tree located on district property on 2nd Street to be used for the downtown holiday tree.
So moved.
A motion made by Barb.
Second.
Second by Miguel. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries. All right, we are moving into agenda item 14, closed session. Enter into closed session. I'm looking for a motion to convene into closed session pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 1985, paren 1, paren C, considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee, specifically early childhood administrative support position.
Okay.
Carlin, are we looking for motion?
So moved.
Okay, motion by Dennis,
Second.
second by G. Carlin, can you please call roll?
Mr. Robbie,
Yes.
Mr. Pope,
Yes.
Ms. Portson,
Yes.
Mr. Summers,
Yes.
Ms. Rano,
Yes.
Mr. Kowalski,
Yes.
Mr. Campos,
Yes.
Ms. Bushman,
Yes,
and motion carries.
thank you. Do you want to?
It's gonna be quick.
Okay.
I think we should just go in, unless, it'll be
Does
quick.
anyone, okay,
Yeah,
all right,
absolutely.
okay. That's funny, I was seeing you laugh.
I know.